Guys, Alex Rodriguez. Give him a hand.
Great being with you. Eli was saying my first book is Digital Bacon, How to Make Your Online Presence Irresistibly Attractive. That book was not translated in Spanish. It was written by me in Spanish, so much respect. I wrote it from scratch in Spanish, and yes, it's been very well received in the marketing and advertising spaces. My latest book is Sell You Before You Sell. Here I have a beautiful cover, Sell You Before You Sell, and it's Boost Your Brand, Close More Sales, and Win Your Game. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking to you today is from the book, so if you enjoy 1% of what I talk about here, you're going to enjoy the book as well. So I want to start the conversation here with an experience that happened to me very recently. And the experience was one of those things that happens to you and you kind of feel good, but you feel bad at the same time. You know, it's kind of the same thing as when you go out to a business lunch and you have a conversation and the person that you were supposed to take out for lunch, they say, oh, don't worry about it, I paid the bill. It's like, well, you feel good, but you also feel bad because it's like, no, I was going to pay the bill. So it's like one of those in-between things. And this happened to me a few months ago. It wasn't that. It was that I was in the office waiting for a business appointment. It was a sales appointment, actually. And the person that came sat down and he said, hey, I want to start this conversation by letting you know that I have a check written in your name. It's already signed. So we're going to close business today. All this appointment is to talk about what exactly this business is. But we've already closed the sale ahead of time. And I felt weird because I was used to an environment where you had to persuade and you had to convince in order to close business. But this, where business was closed ahead of time before even presenting my goods, was not something familiar to me. However, at the same time, it did not happen by accident. It happened because of a concerted effort that I took in raising my profile, in demonstrating my authority. And today, hopefully, you'll walk away with some ideas on how to do this through your publishing and other efforts. Is that okay? So, let's first talk about the whole thing about sales. Now, I told you that experience, and you might say, man, he's a great salesman. And I'm not. I was one of the people that thought that sales was a bad thing. Like, I hate salesmen, I hate pushy salesmen, and I think it was the fault of the people that knocked on our doors selling us vacuum cleaners, and we still have that in our system, that salespeople are pushy and they mess us up, they're vampires of time. And Eli and I have had many conversations about that because his background working with many prestigious brands, and he's tried to get that out of my system. But think about this, going from where sales is just like a very easy thing for me now, but where I started was something that I did not want anything to do with sales. And how did I get to that point? Well, I got there because I realized that there are three gaps, actually. There are three gaps in between the way people sell and have sold for many, many different years and the way consumers expect to be sold to. So there's a gap in between the way consumers, and this applies to B2B consumers and B2C consumers, the way they expect to be sold to is on one end, but the way people continue selling and the way they've done it for 25 years is completely different. And there are three gaps. The first gap, and by the way, let me make a parenthesis here. One of the things that people rate me low in the way I speak is that they realize halfway that they should have been taking notes because I give a lot of information. So you might want to write this down, just a suggestion. But the first gap is the gap called the expectation of value. Now, the way people used to sell in the past was that you went into a sales appointment and there was no value to be delivered until that check was signed, until that payment was processed. There was no value that was delivered. You were reserving everything until the transaction happened. But this is no longer the case in today's environment. Consumers today expect to receive value ahead of the business transaction, before the business transaction is closed. And if you think that's unfair, think about the times that you have purchased a product or a service and what has gone through your head before you went ahead and signed that check. You also expected some value to be delivered before that transaction, before you process that transaction. You might think this is unfair, but it's better to jump on the train than stay at the station and waiting for the train to come back, because this train has left the station. This is the way consumers are going to purchase your goods, your services, your products. You have to deliver value ahead of the business transaction. Gap number 2 is the gap called feudal persuasion. And it sounds fancy, but it's all that means is that act of going into, which is the way they used to do it, they would go into a sales appointment, you knew nothing about the goods, about what is, and have you ever been in a sales appointment where the person is with this position? Yeah. Tell me how much is it going to cost? Just tell me what it is. And they're in a defensive stance, right? And the reason they are in a defensive stance is because at the sales appointment, you're too late to present your goods. That's not the moment to cram in your credibility, your authority, everything that's valuable about you. That's not that moment to convince them. That should have happened way in advance. So that's that gap of feudal persuasion. At that sales appointment, it's too late. Persuading people, when you push them, it's like, do you remember the pinball machines? When you push them too much, what happened? Tilt. You lost. You lost your quarter. You are done. And that's how people react. You lose the game when you start pushing them to close them for your products and services.
Showing your age, Alex. It's not a quarter anymore.
It's not a quarter. I'm a kid of the 70s, even though I might look much younger than that. I'm a 42-year-old millennial, is what I call myself. So the third gap is the gap of influence. The gap of influence. And I'm going to refer here to a statistic from Google. They've analyzed thousands and thousands of businesses. And what Google realized was that the traditional model of purchasing products and services, the traditional model was that people would consume a stimulus. Now, the stimulus could be your placement in a flyer, in a directory. Back then we used the yellow pages. Now people use like a billboard on the street, things like that. That's what's called a stimulus. Then they proceeded to the first moment of truth. And the first moment of truth was that moment where you had the sales appointment. So they get in contact with your products, your services. They consider whether to move forward with the transaction or not. And then the next moment of truth is what's called the second moment of truth, which is when those people consume your products, they take it back home, they take it back to the office, whatever the case may be in your business. So they're having a first-hand experience on whether your product or service is good or not. What Google realized is that in between the stimulus, and this is proven by their stats, in between the stimulus and the first moment of truth, which is that sales appointment, there is one moment that they're calling the zero moment of truth. And the zero moment of truth, they've said that it's the most influential moment that will decide whether that person ends up moving forward with the purchase or hiring you or whatever the case may be in your business. Does that make sense? So that zero moment of truth. So what is that zero moment? It sounds very fancy. It sounds like something out of like Dungeons and Dragons. No, the zero moment of truth is simply that moment of influence. What are people saying about you? And can you prove, can you demonstrate your value in the marketplace, right? So that's the third gap. The third gap is that when you're at the sales appointment and you're pushing and you're persuading, it's too late because you're at the first moment of truth. They're expecting something to be delivered at the zero moment of truth. So you're at 1, they're at 0, and there's a huge gap that needs to be closed. So the way in which I recommend closing those 3 gaps is by raising your profile, raising your authority, demonstrating your value ahead of the sales transaction. And there are 4 characteristics of an impactful personal brand, an impactful profile that you will find very, very interesting, my framework and the way I describe it in the book. And I'll go through them very quickly. So the first one is that, and they start with A, by the way, so you could just write 4 A's, and I'm going to tell you each one. The first one is authenticity. Business is closed only after trust is established. You need to establish that trust first, and then we can talk about business. But if you try to close business and there's no trust, again, that's that gap in the middle. So business is closed only after trust is established. Quality number 2 is attractiveness. People are drawn towards those who understand them deeply, not superficially. People who understand them deeply. One of the things that we do in our firm, in our marketing firm, I failed to mention, it's called Yummy Marketing. We have an office in downtown Tampa. But one of the things that we do is we help them clarify their positioning, their authority, their message. And the way we do it is trying to understand things from the customer's point of view, not from their point of view. Because anybody can say, oh, we're the best, we're number one, da 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 da. Everybody says that. But what is what your customers are feeling? What are their emotional draws towards your products and services? So that's the second quality. The third one is alignment. And by alignment, I mean that value is demonstrated at every point of the customer experience, at every point, particularly before that sales appointment. You have to demonstrate your value ahead of time, and then throughout, and obviously while they're working with you as a client or whatever, while they're consuming your product, you're demonstrating value. But most small business owners, they think only about the value after the transaction. We're trying to break that pattern. We have to demonstrate value at every touch point, okay? So that's alignment, all right? And then the fourth one is what I call awesomeness. And awesomeness, not, oh, awesome, we have coffee in the bag, which it is. It's awesome that we have coffee in the bag, and it's time to drink coffee, so don't fall asleep. Awesomeness means that we demonstrate that we're different by showing up in an outstanding and different manner. Okay? That's how we demonstrate that we're different. In a crowded marketplace, I'm sure that you're all in spaces, in industries where there are other competitors and other players. Right? What's going to mark the difference isn't speaking louder than the others. Anybody can speak loud, and especially people with higher budgets for advertising that you might have. But what's going to make you stand out is showing up in an outstanding manner. Okay? Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each of those four. But it's funny that you are in a little workshop, in a presentation about book writing, because authorship actually checks the boxes on each of these four areas. So let's talk about each one. Authenticity. Do you think, like our speaker that just previously spoke, you had an amazing story, you're so real, and I was listening to you just telling your story about how you went through troubles and you had this being lost and having found a path. That was amazing. Do you think her story can move hearts emotionally? I think it can. Because she's saying something that is so real and so authentic that there's no doubt that in working with her, she's going to have the same business ethic throughout her client experience, right? So authenticity, as long as you tell your story and you're truthful, you can check that box right there, okay? The second one, attractiveness. Again, through authorship, what your goal is to demonstrate your authority in what you're doing, but not just touting your horn, like they say, or tooting your horn. How does it? Tooting your horn. Okay, tooting your horn, but speaking in the language that your customers want to hear your value. Okay, do you understand them to a point where they can say, "This person understands what I'm going through"? When I wrote Digital Bacon, one of my friends actually said, aren't you concerned that by sharing all your knowledge that people are just going to go ahead and copy you? And I said, you know what? I appreciate your question, but I'm not concerned at all. Because if somebody takes my book and implements my ideas, good for them. Awesome. I delivered value. But if somebody reads it and says, this is just too much to do, can you help us? Then great. That's also good. I've had letters written to me by college students that they said that my book has transformed their career. Anything from I'm fine. That's great. Implement my ideas. That's great. Those that are meant to be clients of mine, they're going to come sooner or later. So that's that. Then the third one is alignment. Your job is to publish a book that is authoritative with what is your area of expertise. When I've written my books, I always have the temptation to write about things that are philosophically things that I believe in, but that has no alignment with my business value, right? I'm here to demonstrate my authority in business, in what I know I can do, and the value that I know I can deliver. Make sense? And then the final one is awesomeness. Now, awesomeness has everything to do with the way you write your book, So the language that you use, the quality of your book, how are you conveying that message in a way that it really demonstrates that your professionalism stands out. But it also has to do with the appearance of your book. So for example, what is the packaging of the book? Does your book look professional? Because people are going to judge you from the interior, the exterior, the illustrations, how is it laid out? If your margins are crooked, if it's not well done, that's going to speak about the quality of your business. People will think, well, if he can't even publish his own book or her own book in a proper manner, how is he going to, how is that person going to deliver their services? So your authorship process has the potential of checking those 4 boxes, and in turn, your profile is raised and therefore your business is supported. So I hope these ideas were helpful to you, and I know we're running out of time for this segment, so probably we'll just go into questions that you might have or something like that. Definitely, this is the time. Okay, go ahead.
How do you distinguish between, sometimes I struggle with giving way too much value up front, so knowing where that line is.
So let's define what way too much value is. Way too much value so that they don't need your services anymore, is that it?
Yeah, I end up doing a lot of work for free.
Oh, okay.
And I can only help more people if I'm paying my bills.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a common conundrum, and obviously the answer for each one of you will merit kind of a deep dive in what you're doing for business. But yeah, there has to be a line of demarcation where you deliver information, but you always leave space to deliver your services. Now, I'll tell you our philosophy and how we've approached it is that we deliver so much information as long as it doesn't take time away from us, right? So if I have to meet with somebody, I don't do this anymore, by the way. Alex, let's meet because I love to pick your brain. Oh. Sorry. I only do that after I visited my mama, and I haven't visited my mama this week. So sorry about that. That's what I do because my time is a limited resource, right? Not my knowledge. My knowledge is not unlimited, only God's unlimited, but my knowledge can be expanded and can be scaled. But my time is a limited resource. So what I do, and I tend to do, is record a lot of videos. So if I get a client or a prospect that asks me a question and I see potential of my advice helping more than one person, I'll record it in a video, I turn it into a product, I put it on my YouTube channel, I just send it to them or something like that. And then, number one, I've delivered value to that person, so I'm being honest and upfront, but I take care not to mention their name so that I can have it as a scalable product. Then when somebody else asks me the question, or if I just publish it, publicly, I've got a bunch of videos on my YouTube channel, other people can consume it, they get value out of it, great. So I'm scaling my knowledge, but not my time. My time cannot be scaled.
Alex, does your book include examples of the stimulus, the second moment of truth, and the 0 moment?
Not exactly, no. My book almost, let's say, puts it into a practical advice, but I go over it very superficial with this model of Google. What I would recommend if you Google search Google 0 moment of truth, and download their report, because I can't replicate what they've done. They have a bunch of stats and resources. And actually, there's another website called Think with Google that, for my staff, it's required reading. Because Think with Google has so many advice depending on your industry. If you're in the automotive industry, in the healthcare industry, they'll have examples on that. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
No
Taking
problem.
a finished manuscript, okay, now thinking about your 4 steps, consider that the selling time is when someone picks up a book to look at it and decide if they want it. Okay, so then attractiveness would be the cover and how it looks.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you establish authenticity?
The back cover.
Let me just clarify one thing you said at the beginning.
Okay.
The mere fact that you're an author already establishes authority. So some people don't even read my book, but they believe in my authority. Why? Because my book has been out for 4 years. And if I was a flop, if I was a scam, people would have called me out by now. But my book is in higher education institutions. It's in conferences. So it doesn't have to be that you put together the sales appointment after they read the book. It's like, as long as you have your book out there, you can already say, that zero moment of truth, I've checked that box. But going to your question, and it was, what about the alignment, or what was you?
The authenticity.
Authenticity. So authenticity is proven by telling your story, right? Telling your story. I have a lot of stories about my life in my book, and that's what really proves that your guard is down, that you have nothing to hide, and you're talking from a truthful place. I always talk in my presentation, this is a short presentation, about how my parents were immigrants. My dad ran from his life, from the Dominican Republic after going through the revolution in 1965. He ran for his life. He came to the United States. It was a great country to come in. He naturalized here, but from a very humble beginnings, he instilled in me a value of helping others, right? So my value in what I do in publishing book, my end goal is to help other people. I don't care how it is. I don't care if they hire me. As long as I know that I'm helping others, then it's fine. I'm fulfilling my life mission. And Guy Kawasaki, he was an ex-employee of Apple, has a great quote, and he says, thought leadership is when you help others, when you are putting value before they ask for it, right? So thought leadership is that when you step forward and you publish your ideas before people know that they need it, but you've already done it proactively, that's where you need to be, right? So hopefully I answer that question about authenticity. It's all about taking a step forward and showing up the way you are.